Good morning, everybody. You're welcome to this month's episode of LASSO CBT monthly Azure webinar, where myself, Kazeem, and Adnan Hendricks join in to walk you through some Microsoft Azure goodies. I know the topic that we're covering today, we've talked about a little bit of this in the past, in our past episode. But we'll just do just a little bit of that, and I'm sure Adnan has some more sophisticated stuff that is going to be showing us today. So Adnan, hi. Is it morning or is it afternoon already in the Netherlands? Adnan?
Hi Kazeem, it's afternoon already. I mean, we just hit 12 o'clock, so I think a lot of people are out there having lunch right now. we still working from home and doing those things. So I hope everybody else is keeping safe and taking care. Till we get out of this pandemic thing.
When does it look like you're back at the office at night? I'm doing this from the office at night, so everywhere is already opened up, so to speak.
This is my home office. It's one of the places that I am when I'm not out in the world, So I've been stuck in this room for the past year.
Yeah.
Mostly, going out to the world from my computer.
Okay.
And so far, it's been fun. It's nice being back here at the monthly Azure webinar. We're going to be talking about a lot of stuff. So we're going to be speaking about basically the evolution of the abilities that you have to run applications in Azure. Because we look at what we did in the past, you had to install an application on a computer, or a server, we had physical machines. So we're basically going to look at the whole evolution path of physical machines, and then we went to virtual, and we're going to look at what's available right now, because I know that a lot of people are talking about, serverless apps, and then you have the camp that's talking about containerization and containers, and you have these two camps that are betting at which one's going to be the future. And right now, I see it as like a mesh, because you can have containerized offerings that are serverless, like what we're going to be talking about, Microsoft Azure, Kubernetes service, so there's going to be like a lot of infrastructure methods being offered by providers like Microsoft as PaaS offerings. And, it's just easier for people like us and developers who want to make their application available by not having to think about the underlying infrastructure, and that means complexity is less and cost is low, so win-win.
Yes, yes, sure. So I'm sure we have a little less than an hour to do this. So I'm just going to jump in really quickly to just do a little recap of what we've done in the past, and possibly show people what it looks like to create an app service plan and an Azure App Service, and I can pass it over to you, Adnan.
Yeah.
Okay. So quickly, App Service. What is an Azure App Service? Anytime you're looking to build some front-end app, you need a service that helps you to host, that app. So App Service is an HTTP-based service that helps you host your web apps. Now, you're not just limited to hosting web apps with your app service. You can also use it to host mobile apps. You can use it to host RESTful API as well. And the cool thing about the Azure App Service is also the fact that it supports a number of IDEs, right? So if you're a developer and you like to code .NET, you like to do Node.js, Python, Ruby, PHP, so you are all covered with the Azure App Service. There's also support, right, for both Windows. We know now it's no longer news that the Linux OS is a first-class citizen now up on Azure. So there's also the management part of it, so you can manage via the CLI. You can use some other IDE like your Visual Studio to do the management as well. And there's the Azure portal also that you can leverage. So we know that the Azure service, app service, based on what we've covered in the past now, it's very easy to scale. So you can start really small and scale up and down as needed, right? So I think for time, so let's just look at a little bit of some of these things right on the portal, and if it's necessary, to mention a few of those features as we go. So we'll try to do so. So I'll stop sharing my screen now and sure that my screen is visible. Adnan, yes, okay, all right. So again, to log into the Azure portal, so it is portal.azure.com. So it brings you to this landing page here, and from here you can start to create your stuffs. So I already have a resource group. The resource group is that container that helps you logically group your stuffs together. So I have a resource group for those demos. So I've decided to name the resource group Lasso CBT App Service, right? So we're going to be working within this particular resource group here. So I want to create a resource. So I'm going to hit the create a resource button. So I'll try to create a web app, right? A web app. Good. So first, you need to choose a valid subscription for yourself, put it inside a valid resource group, and you give it a name. So by default, you need to ensure that you give it a distinct name because the name is going to have a suffix of azurewebsites.net, as you can see here. So it has to be a unique name on the Azure websites.net domain name. So how about we call this Lasso CBT 18? So the fully qualified domain name now becomes lassocbt18.azurewebsites.net. So here you can get to choose a runtime of choice for yourself. So if you like to do .NET or you prefer to do .NET Core, so you can choose one that you're comfortable with. So how about I go with .NET Core here? And the operating system, are you doing Windows or you prefer to go with Linux? So let me look at doing Linux here. And choose a region of choice for yourself. So best practice here is for you to choose a region that is closest to you. And the next thing we need to do is to also create an app service plan, right? So app service plan, you can visualize it more like that container that helps you all things like your processing power, the CPU, the memory, the storage that you need for your app. So all of those resources is tied up under the app service plan. So if you're looking to scale, for instance, you get to do the scaling from the app service plan, right? So I will create a new app service plan, give my app service plan a name. How about I call this also Lasso CBT plan or Lasso CBT app plan. Hit the OK button. So you can choose a size. So as you can see here, change the SKU and the size. So you probably want to choose something depending on the kind of app that you're trying to build. So if let's just have a look at it here. So if I click this, so you see we have production, you have isolated, and you have dev or test environment. So if I'm trying to build this application for use in production environments, So then I want to pick between this SKU, these tiers, right? And if I'm trying to build a mission critical mobile or web app, then I want to go with isolated, right? But what we're doing is just for test, for demo's sake. So I want to step things down just a little bit. And B1 would be just fine for me. So by clicking on your pricing tier, it's able to give you things that you would expect, how much memory you can use up, the compute unit, whether you have access to custom domains with SSL, your storage space, and how about scaling? So in this case with B1, I can scale up to 3 instances. That is talking about scaling out now. It's quite different from scaling up. Scaling up is when you're trying to add more memory, more processing power, so that's scaling up. But when we talk scaling out, you're trying to add multiple instances to your instance here. So I'll select B1 in this case, and let's review this and create it. So it's trying to validate, and hopefully the creation process should go smoothly. So now a few things I want to mention before passing it on to Adnan. I want to show how do you also upload. Now we've created an app service. So an app service, sometimes you want to use it for your own website, for instance. So how do you upload the content into your app service? So there are different tools that you can leverage. You can use your Visual Studio. You can use, I have a tool here that I make use of. So it's the WinSCP that you can also use to connect to your app service. So when you use this tool to connect to your app service, so it's going to ask you for username, password. So I'll show you in just a little bit now, where you can get those information from. You download your profile, and from the profile you can pick up the password. Okay, this has succeeded here. So let's see what it looks like here. Good. So this is what we have. Our app service is up on its feet now. So you can do things like, change between the deployment slots, right? So if you want to change between deployment slots, you can do that. So I can do production deployment slots, testing deployment slots. So if I'm trying to play with SSL settings, so I can do that here. If you're looking to change your domain name, you notice earlier that when we wanted to create this app service, it prompted us for a name. So I gave it LASSO-CBT, but it has a suffix of AzureWebsites.net. So AzureWebsites.net might not be a URL that you want to use. So you probably want to use your own URL or a more friendly URL. So you can host that name and change the name to a name of your choice, and you get to do that under custom domains, right? So there are a number of other options here that we have, things like scaling up. So you can see our app service plan. So if I feel that this app service plan is no longer meeting my need, my users are starting to complain about my connectivity to my app dragging, so I can look to use to scale up as necessary, right? So I can also scale out. So I mentioned to you the difference between the scaling up and the scaling out. So if I need to get into the nitty-gritty of this app service plan itself, so I can also do that from here. And talking about connecting to this, I can connect to it by just clicking on the URL here, and let me paste it here, and we have okay, so it's trying to load. But what we're going to get anyways is the default, yes. So this default interface is what we're going to get. So if you're looking to change this interface now to a more friendly interface, so what you need to do here is get your publish profile. So I can download the profile. So I'm trying to download the profile now. And the profile now has been downloaded. So I can try to open the file. So there are a number of tools you can use to open it. You can open it with Notepad. So let me crack it open with Notepad here. And you look for password. So you can see user password is here. So I can copy out my password here. That's my password. And if I'm trying to log into this app, I can log in with this tool, WinSCP, or use some other tool. So from WinSCP, I can try to open up a new session, whether you want to connect as SFTP or FTP. So put in your password and your username. My username is this. And the host name. So I can get the host name from here. And then try to log in. So as you can see now, so I'm connected. So if I have my file, this is the file. That page that you were seeing as the default page earlier on is this page right here. So if I have a file that I've created, in fact, let me just quickly do one in about 10 minutes here. How about I open up Notepad and do a little HTML, right? And close my tag HTML and the add paths and so I'll try to save this, save as. So I'll try to save it as index, right? So how about I call it index.html. Index.html inside my document. Good. So I have my document here, so I'll look up index. I can select the file and push it up. So to upload, I'll just simply upload to retry. Okay, so you get the picture here. So now I've uploaded it of the demo, but you've seen what you need to do is make sure that you have your files ready on your local system and you can look to upload the files up to Azure. So this side of the screen is my local system and this part of it is what I have on Azure. So I'll try to resolve things and do a refresh and try to show it to you before Adnan finishes his part of the session. So Adnan, it's over to you now.
Thank you, Kazeem. Let me just share my screen. Let me just start quickly. So thank you for showing everybody about the Azure App Service. It's just one of the ways you can host or have an application running or made available on Azure. So some of the things that want to look about and talk about and what you've just seen is app service plans, containers, serverless, and talk about AKS, because the whole idea of the session is really just to step you guys through the evolution of what was possible, how we used to run applications, and all the possibilities that we have now with Azure and what we can do to run an application in the cloud. So a lot of people still busy with transforming the data centers, either still running physical servers and virtual machines, or running hybrid, or making use of Azure. And you either have the application installed on a physical server or virtual machines, and that's pretty much how, up until now, people have been running applications in their own data centers. Also what's available in Azure for now, along with the app service. Now, a lot of the challenges that people used to have was things like scalability, performance, and also safety and security. But with Azure, we've seen in the past that it's really an intelligent cloud and has a lot of options and services available for you to make use of right now. And that's something that we really want you guys to see. So infrastructure as a service, most people still doing it, but SaaS applications where people have hosted applications, and sometimes these are either cloud applications written as app service, or they're still just running physically or installed physically on their own servers or web servers, and you're just accessing it through the web. Now, when it comes to real scalability, you can look at running your application as a PaaS, where it is less infrastructure and management for your control, and more things gets done by the cloud vendor, like Microsoft in this case. And this is where things like infrastructure as a service, what you need to handle, what PaaS does, and what SaaS application. So with Microsoft Azure, you can run PaaS applications or use the PaaS platform to host your applications, meaning you only have to worry about your application and not the underlying infrastructure. And that is what Kazeem showed with the app service plan and creating an app service where you really just focused on creating the app. The underlying infrastructure, you're paying for that, but it's all managed by Microsoft in this case. And the nice thing is, the more you modernize, the lower your operational costs. So I want to take it a step further than the app service and just talk about the different platforms that you can use to run your application. So obviously, going infrastructure as a service, running it as a VM instead of a physical machine, and then using platform as a service options, and then going towards things that are serverless and also offered as a PaaS offering. This flowchart or decision chart really explains everything in detail. Now, there's a lot of different services that you can make use of depending on the type of application that you either want to create or have hosted in Azure. So a lot of those traditional applications that's running on a physical machine, so you can do a lift and shift or have it cloud optimized, so you can move that entire virtual machine or physical machine, have it exported as a virtual machine, and have that virtual machine hosted in Azure, meaning you have to control, you require a lot of control on that application and the infrastructure. But when you don't need a lot of control, so you can lift and shift the application instead of the underlying operating system, you can move it towards a app service. For example, the bottom over here on the app service. Obviously, if you can't run and you need that control, you will have to take a virtual machine. Now, depending on the options, so if it's something that high performance workloads that you need to do, you can utilize Azure Batch. If you want to create a microservices architecture, you have other options, right? And also depending on if it's event-driven workloads. For example, it's a short-lived process. You can create an Azure function, which is a form of serverless computing. You also have Azure Logic Apps. And those are just things that you can use to create those small little modules or little processes of your application and have it hosted as a function and have it run. So obviously, depending on the type of application, sometimes it can be a mixture of these options, as some of my demos. Now, one of the platforms that you can use is containerization, if you can make the application available as a container. Now, we went from physical machines to virtual machines, and the next step after that was creating containers. And a container, much like a virtual machine, it's really just enough operating system for that application to run. So it's all contained, and you have the option to run an application as a container, either as an app service, as a container instance, or as a Azure Kubernetes service if you want to do orchestration and clustering of different containers. Now, obviously, if you can split up that app into different applets or different microservices, you have different options. So you could split it up into Azure Service Fabric as the platform to build that application and use the entire Microsoft technology stack in there. And as last, like I mentioned, if you can containerize the application and you want to simplify management of that, you can make use of the Azure Kubernetes service. Is a serverless form of PaaS that you can make use of that will manage your container clusters. And that's something that we are going to be looking at. So Kazeem already mentioned the app service, but the point that I want to point out over here is that you can also deploy that container to an app service or directly from code. So you have the app service, you also have app service environments that you can set up. And just to show you the underlying architecture, where you have all these different Azure services that can host your applications. So you have the Service Fabric, AKS, you have your web apps and different PaaS offerings under the Azure Resource Manager that you can communicate with through ARM templates, CLI, PowerShell, etc., or the portal. So some of the advantages when moving away from virtual machines, where you still need to make use of the infrastructure, or going towards serverless, like, is you don't really have to do infrastructure management. Scalability is quite high because you're not managing the infrastructure. Microsoft manages an on-demand scalability. You can bring faster time to market because you're not worried about underlying infrastructure. You can just focus on the application. So better development time and more efficient use of resources. So just to show some of the options, I mentioned that Logic Apps is a form of serverless. You have the web apps, and you also have mobile apps that you can go create for the mobile platform. So Logic Apps can communicate with all the underlying infrastructure with the platform. Same thing with functions. And Logic Apps, you can use a visual designer. The best next step shows it a lot better. So it's basically like a workflow connecting different services, environments, and also applications with one another that you can link up, and makes it easier to build an application that way. So when choosing the right or appropriate compute stack, based on the application, where you can host it, obviously lift and shift, you move into virtual machines and scalability with VM scale sets. But if you need less control, you can move towards things like serverless environments and also PaaS and containerization. So same thing, highly scalable, highly available, more automation. It's easier to migrate once you're sitting on that platform because you're only migrating your application part, and the underlying infrastructure can be scaled up or down based on load. So obviously lots of features for management and monitoring your resources, because you just focused on your application. So you have, just to show you a little bit between PaaS and serverless, so more control over the deployment environment. Serverless, less control over the deployment environment, but you're only basically writing your code, and both have no server management. So app service, some of the options, auto-scaling, enterprise-grade environments. So looking at things under the app service umbrella also falls under the things like an Azure function, or an app service environment, or a web app for the containers. So where you can bring your own container to the app service, and Windows or Linux, etc. So looking at containers, and just to show you quickly the difference between a containerized application and a virtual machine, you notice that the virtual machine runs with its own guest operating system and its app on top of a hypervisor. But containerized applications, they use the same hosted infrastructure with the operating system, and then on top of that you have the Docker interface and the different applications, container applications can run in there. So quite a big difference you can see, and each virtual machine can have its own guest operating system, but then once again you have to manage everything. So the Docker supports multiple applications under the same shared infrastructure. When looking at running containers in a cluster, where you want to orchestrate management and the entire environment of the containers, maybe in a microservices environment, then you're going to be looking at utilizing Azure Kubernetes Service on Azure. And just to show you a little bit of what that architecture looks like, so it's a Kubernetes service as a service, and basically you just have to worry about your underlying infrastructure, which is supporting your workloads. So all your containers, workloads can be running in pods. You have a load balancer that you can communicate through from the front end to the backend services, and those backend services can still be hooked up into different backend databases. And you have your cluster management that you can also use Azure AD authentication, or Azure Key Vault, or usual Azure Monitor to monitor the environment. So just to show you once again what the AKS infrastructure looks like. So you have all these different pods that are running your container infrastructure, and those that's really where your application will reside. So I want to take you straight into the demo environment. We don't have that much time. So going to my Azure environment, I just want to move it across. So over here I have just to quickly show you, I have a function app, or an application that's running as a function. And basically all my programmatic modules are based in these functions. So I've got these 3 functions, and my application is basically a web application that I've loaded onto a static storage, because it's a static HTML. So I don't want to run it as an app service, because I don't need scalability or infrastructure requirements, but I want to make it so that my programmatic part is in a function. And if I look at my resource group, just to show you a bit what it looks like, I have things like my dashboard for monitoring. I've got a database. I've got my function app listed. I've got my application insights. I've got my storage account. and I have my app service planned for my Azure Function app. So my application for my storage, that I have over here. I have my file information, and this is basically where I've placed those the data for my application. And go back to show you that the site information is basically stored here. So all my HTML is listed over here. And, just quickly. There we go. So this is basically my application. And this is an application that I often use in my demos to demonstrate serverless function. And you can just upload a file. And once I click on upload, the functions will get image, will place it into a thumbnail. So all this you're seeing is hosted in a database. This is running on the storage, and the programmatic things behind uploading and placing my images and working with this is my function. But then I can also run an application like this as a container. So I can still use an app service container, but then if I were to have it hosted as a on a Azure Kubernetes service cluster, for example, here in my I just want to open the resource group. In this cluster, I've got my Kubernetes service for a workload. I can look at my nodes in my different Kubernetes cluster that is hosting my application. And in this environment and demo, I have a different application, and it's basically a web application. And this is something you can try as well by going through this IP address. You have the Azure voting app, and this application is running on the Azure Kubernetes platform as a service. And this is basically just a simple web application that you can click on to vote on whether you prefer cats or dogs. So I invite you guys to also go and try this application. And the nice thing is, if you have your subscription, you can actually go and try this. You can go and try this application because it's listed as a tutorial in the docs microsoft.com Azure AKS to create a Kubernetes cluster application. So I invite you guys to go and set up a with your in your Azure subscription, just to go and deploy, and you get a step-by-step on how to go and clone this from the GitHub repo and to create the Azure container. So deploying a Docker image and just walk through the step-by-step option of creating a cluster, running the application, being able to also scale the application. So lots of nice things for you guys to go and try out, and you can have the same application running as I have over here. And basically, you're just going to creating a cluster, different nodes running in the cluster that's supporting that application. So a lot of nice information to go and look at. Going back to my session. So the idea was to show you that there's all these different ways and platforms to have your application listed. So this is one of the ways in which you find that a lot of companies are providing their applications as containers. And this is just what a lot of companies do internally to have their application running as containers on pods and a AKS or a Kubernetes cluster. And you can have that same thing running in Azure. Now, the nice thing about having these the service available in Azure is that you can also port things like if you have a hybrid environment, let's say you have your own cluster on premises, you can scale out to Azure and have that on-demand availability. So there's a lot of flexibility in scale. And the same thing within Azure, you can scale from one region to another region, etc., and have a high uptime in your availability in your application. So cloning from GitHub repos or private repos, etc., and having Azure AD identities and authentication with that. So with CLI and Azure templates, the Cloud Shell, Azure CLI PowerShell, you can go and set these up. There's also ARM templates that you can utilize to create these different infrastructures. But the whole idea from the session was to show you quick bits. I know I'm running out of time, but to show you that instead of having things like just an app service, there's all these different ways depending on whether your client maybe requires or has an existing infrastructure based on these forms, but that there's also things like serverless computing as an option if your application can allow for that, or whether you're running it as a container instance, or if you want to use you want to simplify deployment and management and orchestration of multiple containers, then utilize the Azure Kubernetes service. And that's basically what we want to do, talk to you about. So app service plans on Azure, you have the option as containers. You still always have the option to run your application on a virtual machine, but then you have to make sure that you're managing the underlying hosting platform for infrastructure. But there's so many different services within Azure that you can use. And the future, serverless Kubernetes clusters, let us know which ones you see being more utilized. And the nice thing is that I'm hearing more and more third-party vendors that making their applications available for Kubernetes clusters or as container form. So let us know which ones you guys use, planning to use, are using, and also which ones you seem to appreciate the most that's available on Azure. With that, I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and go back to Kazeem. Hey, Kazeem. So I thought I'd just
Yes.
finish up within the time that we have to keep it nice and short, but we can expand more on pure just setting up an Azure Kubernetes cluster and things in future, and focus solely on containers. But the whole idea of the session was just to show everyone, from the past what we used and what the options are now. So Everything's available in Azure.
Everything.
There's lots of things to talk about. And like I mentioned to you before we started, there's, because I'm getting a lot of asked about what are the possibilities or what's blockchain and cryptocurrency and things. And we're quite far ahead in that. And, it's where I'm seeing companies starting to use that technology right now. So it's really matured and kind of grown up, the whole blockchain technology and setting up smart contracts, and it's way further than just Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. So that's something that I've been also talking about recently. So people can let us know if they have an interest in that, and we can have a session on that as well.
Yes, thank
and also
you,
what
Adnan.
they can do on Azure, So.
Yes, and I think just like you rightly mentioned, blockchain is also beginning to gain a lot of popularity even here in Nigeria as well. So I think that's a topic people really should be interested in. But we could try to do a poll before the webinar next month to see which of them people really will be interested in. So yes. So this is how much we've got time for today on this month's episode. So you can have a rewatch of the previous episode on YouTube, on our channel on YouTube. That's the Last CBT 18 on YouTube. So we've done a couple of episodes before this one, so you can have a rewatch. And in just before our close of work today, so this one should also be up on YouTube. So if you'd like to, maybe you didn't join us from the very beginning, and you'd like to have a run through of it again, so be kind enough to hit the subscribe button, on the YouTube pages, and continue to keep safe. And let's do this again another time. I don't know if there's any last words from you, Adnan, before we say bye-bye now.
Just people need to like, subscribe, and they can always contact us directly. I'm at MicroSpecialist. Kazeem can teach.
Yes.
Twitter, on our socials, and just let us know what you guys think and what you guys would like to see in future episodes. Thank you. That's all from me.
Okay, thank you very much, and we'll see you again another time. So from myself and Adnan, it's bye-bye.
Bye-bye.